What's going on YouTube? Username Kite562 here, and I have another audio review for you all of my Sherlock Holmes Short Story collection. So be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you enjoy the content on this channel. I'm your host Kite562 of Kite562 Books and Manga Reviews with an audio review of His Last Bow by Sir Aurthur Conan Doyle. Now, this is just a way for me to document my thoughts, so again, be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you enjoy the content on this channel. I'm your host, Kite562, so let's get on with it. So, with this being the third short story collection out of 5 within the Sherlock Holmes canon, I will be documenting my thoughts on all 8 short stories featured in this part of my book, which I'll leave at the top right of this audio review, video review, whatever you want to call it. So let's get on with story 1, Wisteria Lodge, and before that, these brief reviews are going to be to the point, so there's that. So let's get on with story 1, Wisteria Lodge. For the plot of this story, Sherlock and Watson have to investigate the murder of a Mr. Aloysius Garcia. Inspector Gregson and his companion, Inspector Baines of the Constabulary of Surrey, think that John Scott Eccles murdered Mr. Garcia last night at Wisteria Lodge. And so for the first and only side note, from the start of this story, it really reminds me of the first novel of A Study in Scarlet, even though we haven't reached the lodge yet where the murder of Mr. Garcia took place. For my final thoughts, this story feels more like a more observe and enjoy as you read this story. However, I will say that this short story did remind me a lot of the first Holmes novel, A Study in Scarlet, which I do have a playlist on my channel. So let's get on with story 2, The Cardboard Box. Miss Susan Cushing was a victim of a horrible prank yesterday. However, something more sinister might be behind it. So for the only side note, Mrs. Cushing has seemed to have gotten on the bad side of 3 medical students in the past when she rented an apartment out to them, it seems. I think she got tired of all the noise they were making when they do medical experience or whatnot, it seems. And so for my final thoughts on this one, 2 stories in, and I feel like these stories are quick, cozy mysteries, just to take in and see what unfolds. Or they were ideas that Mr. Doyle had and just threw them into a short story collection. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. So again, these stories are quick, cozy mysteries to just take in and see what unfolds. This has to be my favorite story so far, and I do recommend you give this story a chance. So let's get on with story number 3, The Red Circle. Mrs. Warren tries to convince Holmes and Watson to get this unwanted guest out of the room that he rents. Even though Bairdell Hobbs seems to be up with his payments, Mrs. Warren just can't stand the noises Mr. Hobbs makes. So for the note, it seems to me that Mr. Warren was kidnapped from his housing just 10 paces away, or 10 blocks, whatever you want to call it, at least according to the top of page 946, and I'll leave a link to the top right of the book that I cite from. So who could have done this to Mr. Hobbs to have angered them so much to have caused this? And for the final thoughts, these stories are quick and to the point. Like I said before, I did find this short story very enjoyable. I did not see the surprise twist coming though, which is a good thing. I thought this was going to be a stalker that hides in the walls while watching their victim before they strike, some type of story. You know, you get the idea? So let's get on with story number 4, The Bruce-Partington Plans. For the plot of this story, Sherlock and Watson feel like they only have small groups of thieves to deal with on this November of 1895, until Mycroft Holmes, Sherlock's older brother, asks for his younger brother's help to solve the mystery of a dead man named Arthur Cadogan West. And so, for the note, from reading the first 2 pages of the stories, it feels like an episode of Law and Order to me. The way that everything seems to flow to their hands like water, I feel like this is going to be an interesting story. So for my final thoughts, this story was a great adventure. Even though these stories are short and to the point, the stories I've read so far have been a relaxing experience. And again, this story collection feels like a collection of ideas that Arthur Conan Doyle wanted to make into full novels or something. At least that's just how I see it. So let's get on with story number 5, The Dying Detective. So the plot of this story is Sherlock Holmes seems to be at death's door yet again from a strange illness he caught in the alley while trying to solve one of his cases in Rotherhithe? I really don't know how you're supposed to say this, but it's Rotherhithe, so Rotherhithe it is, it seems. So both Watson and Miss Hudson look back on the times they spent with the detective Sherlock Holmes. And so for my final thoughts on this story, it wasn't my favorite from this collection. For me, it was quite predictable for what happened to Holmes. I did find it very sweet how both Watson and Mrs. Hudson looked back at their interactions with Sherlock Holmes, mainly Mrs. Hudson, the landlady of Sherlock's office. So, with that said, let's get on with story number 6, The Disappearance of Lady Frances Carfax. For the plot of story number 6, a Mrs. Lady Frances of Carfax has gone missing suddenly. Even though she always kept to a very particular routine, something horrible may have happened to her. What that may be, I don't know. So for my first side note, couldn't Marie Devine, Lady Frances's former housemaid, have helped the noblewoman vanish without a trace? That's what I'm wondering here. And for my final thought, I'm willing to say that I was completely wrong on the short story, which is quite alright if I say. The descriptions in this story were quite beautifully written. However, it was kind of jarring with the rapid fire pace of new characters being introduced to the story, which left me kind of confused as a whole, so that's just my only little gripe. So let's get on with story number 7, The Devil's Foot. For the plot of this story, Sherlock and Watson investigate a strange death of 3 siblings of Mortimer Tregennis, 2 brothers Owen and George, and a sister named Brenda. Strange thing is, everything seems to be in place even after Mr. Tregennis left the night before, it seems. However, the 3 individuals were left in place were now dead and frozen with sheer terror on their faces. And so for my side note, from the beginning of the story, it really reminds me of the 2005 remake of the film House of Wax with Jared Padalecki and Paris Hilton for some reason. This is the story that comes first to my mind. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind. And for my final thoughts, this was a great story, but the solution to the deaths was quite predictable in my mind as I was reading. However, this feels more like a much better version of the Red Circle story in this collection, as I told you about before. I wish the story didn't end so quickly and it was more of a full novel, because the concept itself was really intriguing along with where everything took place. It was just absolutely fantastic. So let's get on with the final story, His Last Bow. So the plot of His Last Bow is Sherlock Holmes comes out of retirement after 2 years to investigate crimes being committed by Germans in England. And I really don't want to spoil this, so my final thoughts are, I did not enjoy this story at all. It was difficult to follow who was talking. It felt more like the telling of a journal entry from Watson's point of view, as with the novels. So this collection had some hits and misses. It's not as memorable as the other short stories that I've read within the Sherlock Holmes canon, but it's the short story collection, His Last Bow, it's alright. It's like a 7.5 out of 10 for me, but that's just me. So yeah, that's my review of His Last Bow by Sir Aurthur Conan Doyle. So again, be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the content on this channel. I'm your host Kite562 signing out, and as always, I hope you have a wonderful day, everybody. Later.